Hey there, it's Steve from Serious Keto, and this is the Not So Serious Keto video podcast. I'm going to start this one with Keto in the News. I haven't done a Keto in the News segment in quite a while because there just hasn't been any keto news that's showed up in my Google News feed. It's pretty much all been Aaron Rodgers, it seems like lately. So it was a pleasant surprise when I saw this article from Insider.com on Halle, and I'll link to the article down in the description below. But one of the things that I didn't know, well, I did know that Halle did keto, but I didn't realize how long she has been doing keto. So she was diagnosed with diabetes at age 22 and started the ketogenic diet. And now she's 54, so she's been doing this for over 30 years, which kind of conflicts with the complaint or statement that we often get when we're on keto that it's just not sustainable. Clearly, it is and has been for Ms. Berry. It's a pretty short and fairly fluffy article, honestly, but in it, Halle Berry talks about how she believes that the ketogenic diet has really been the key to her youth and fitness all of these years. Naturally, as with any article on keto, they got to throw a little bit of shade at keto at the end, questioning how well it works, if it's really sustainable or not, which seems to me to be a weird argument, especially after talking about how Halle's been doing this for over 30 years. Anyhow, like I said, I'll include the link down below. It's fun to see a piece on keto that's a little bit more positive than a lot of what we see in the media. One of the segments that I've promised to do, probably once a month on the podcast, is a cookbook review. And generally my plan is to look at non-keto cookbooks and talk about how keto-friendly or keto-fiable they are. I have found in my history of buying cookbooks that keto cookbooks generally lead to disappointment for me. They're not all that good. They're not all that creative. You wind up seeing a lot of the substitutions like lettuce in place of a hamburger bun. Generally, they're just a lot of kind of mediocre recipes. And I will, if I come across any keto cookbooks that I think are especially good, that I really think people ought to have, I'll talk about those in a future podcast. But the one that I'm going to review today is Keto BBQ by Myron Mixon. I was first exposed to Myron Mixon, I think it was in an ad or something like that for his barbecue school, and he came across as a pretty laid-back, fun sort of guy that just wants to make barbecue accessible. And then I started watching a show called Barbecue Pitmasters. I can't remember if I found it on Netflix or if it was on Discovery or what channel it was, but Myron Mixon is in that along with a number of other pitmasters competing, going to various national competitions, and I really kind of found Myron Mixon to be a bit of a jerk in this show. And I wasn't sure if it was a character that he was sort of playing, whether he was trying to hype up the villain thing by being really disrespectful to his peers, disrespectful to the pitmaster legends that came before him. It just struck me that his mouth and his ego outpaced his talent rather considerably, especially, when you look at the competitions that he's won or not won. But that aside, this is not a great cookbook. I've got a few issues with it, and I'm going to kind of ramp them up in terms of little issues to big issues. The book starts with sort of a high-level overview of keto, and in it, I get the impression that Mr. Mixon doesn't have a super-duper scientific grasp on keto. He practices sort of a dirty, lazy keto, and I don't have a problem with dirty keto, I don't have a problem with lazy keto, but I think if you're creating a cookbook, you kind of need to give that choice to your readers. Provide them the necessary information and let them decide how diligent they want to be, how strict they want to be. Myron Mixon does not track macronutrients. That's fine, but he doesn't even list them on any of the recipes. So if you are someone that wants to track macronutrients, how are you going to do it? You're going to have to enter each one of these recipes into something like Carb Manager or Chronometer. So not only does he not track his macros, he kind of throws a little bit of shade at it. Let me read a chunk for you. The key is to keep your food intake at 70 to 75% healthy fats, 20 to 25% protein, and about 5% carbs. That's the formula you're supposed to follow anyway, and some people do it very religiously. They buy something called a, quote, keto macro calculator to help track the nutrient consumption every day. You can do that if you like, if you're the kind of person who finds numbers soothing and needs extra support. He also talks about how keto does not restrict calories, which, is partially true, but you still can't just go to town and eat unlimited calories on keto. And then he summarizes keto like this, making sure to give himself a little pat on the back along the way. Keto doesn't involve counting calories, but you do have to cut out, avoid, and drastically limit certain foods. That means cutting out sugar, starches, and grains. That means limiting fruits that contain high levels of sugar. That means no more sandwiches for lunch and no more spaghetti for dinner. You think that sounds hard? I don't even want to hear it. I've had to do so much harder stuff in my life, and you have too. Winning the World Championship of Barbecue 4 times is much more difficult. So is figuring out how to support your family after you've just gotten a divorce, your dad just died, and you've got 2 kids and a truck payment. Put down that piece of pizza and pick up a smoked chicken leg and keep moving with your weight loss goals. In the preamble to pretty much every recipe, you can find Myron's ego and self-backpatting going on. The recipes themselves are not that innovative. Honestly, if you bought any sort of barbecue cookbook and then just substituted out your sweeteners, basically, you'd be fine. There are recipes in this cookbook that use canola oil, which is highly inflammatory, a garbage oil I pretty much try and steer clear of. Why? Why use that when you could have used avocado oil or olive oil, for example? He mentions using mayo in a number of recipes, but bear in mind that most store-bought mayos is made from soybean oil, which is another garbage oil. There are recipes that use ketchup, not sugar-free ketchup, just ketchup. That's a problem. But perhaps the biggest problem is the one sweetener that he uses, which is monk fruit. And I'm going to read you the portion where he talks about monk fruit. There are so many alternative sweeteners out there on the market that when I first started following a keto plan, I didn't know which one to try and what the difference was. You can thank me now. Oh, okay, thanks. I tried a whole bunch of them, so you don't have to. The one product I like best is made from the Chinese mountain orchard melon called monk fruit. This sweetener is extracted from that fruit, which is why it's sometimes called monk fruit extract. And a little goes a long way. I read that scientists estimate that monk fruit sweetener is 150 to 250 times as sweet as sugar. That's no big deal, and it just means you need to use less of it in, say, a barbecue sauce recipe. He then goes on, he talks about the cost of it, but he says to make sure that when you buy it, you don't get a version that has been mixed with other sweeteners, starches, or stabilizers. You want your monk fruit sweetener to have one ingredient in it: monk fruit. If any of you have tried pure monk fruit, it is unbelievably intense. Courtney and I tried it out in one of our sweetener videos from, probably close to 2 years ago. And incredibly intense with sort of a burning plastic type of aftertaste if it's not cut. So Myron Mixon is recommending using pure monk fruit in his recipes. And here's one example. This whole smoked turkey calls for 1/3 of a cup of monk fruit. That would be the equivalent, if you're looking at the low end of the sweetness equivalent of monk fruit, of having 50 cups of sugar in a recipe. My guess is that Myron Mixon is probably using something like Lakanto. So that, I think, is 95% erythritol, and the rest is monk fruit. You need to cut monk fruit, or it's just going to be nasty. And people are going to follow these instructions, buying pure monk fruit based on what Myron Mixon says in this book. They're going to make some of these recipes and absolutely destroy their meat. The one final complaint that I have about this book is it just seems like he was sort of lazy in terms of the recipes. Lots of times he'll just give you the list of ingredients. He'll say, combine them all and let's sit for an hour or something like that. Usually I think there's a little bit more process involved in cooking. Like, do I whisk these together? Do I whisk them together one at a time? Additionally, when it comes to the various smoking recipes, he doesn't tell you what type of wood chip that he would recommend, which strikes me as a bit of an oversight on a book on barbecue. So on the whole, I can pretty comfortably not recommend this book. I think if you use my barbecue rub recipe and my barbecue sauce recipe, both of which I adapted from Jeff Phillips at smoking-meat.com, I think you've got a great head start into keto barbecue. And I'm sure over the course of this summer, I'll come up with a few more recipes, but you can probably safely avoid Myron Mixon's keto barbecue. So while we're sort of on the topic of keto barbecue, I suppose it's time that I address the whole keto hot dog bun situation. It hasn't been going well. And in fact, it's kind of broken my spirit. Keto baking is it is perplexing to me as someone who used to bake a lot back pre-keto. And I've kind of got to throw in the towel, but not completely throw in the towel, because I will provide you with a couple of alternatives. The first of which is the store-bought alternative. When I was recently at Costco, they had the Natural Ovens hot dog bun. Now, if you watch the Natural Ovens bread review that I did, that had about, I think, a 30-point blood glucose spike for me when I had that. Plus, I felt some inflammation from it. Nevertheless, I saw these hot dog buns and I thought, I'll give them a try. And they're good. Well, I mean, for a hot dog bun, I'll throw that out. I mean, it tastes like a white bread hot dog bun. So if that sounds tasty to you, then they hit it. They nailed it. On the downside, there are some ingredients that either I or other people may find sketchy. So if you've got a gluten issue, this has wheat gluten in it. Not an issue for me, but I know it is for a number of you. The issue for me is it has soybean oil in it. And that, just like clockwork, I'll feel that in my joints the next day. And certainly that was the case with these buns. I felt it in my right thumb. My right thumb got really stiff and sort of arthritic, and I felt it in my knees for a solid day and a half. Interestingly though, here's the results from the Level software. Whereas the bread had an impact on my glucose, the bun had no impact at all. I made a roast beef sandwich on the bun because I didn't have any hot dogs or bratwursts available. No movement at all over 2 hours. So from a blood glucose standpoint, that was a pleasant surprise. Now the question is, am I willing to deal with a day of discomfort in my knees and knuckles for the sake of a bratwurst or hot dog on a bun? Maybe, from time to time. I mean, we don't eat them all that often, so that's an alternative. The other possibility, and this is for those of you who are into baking. If you're not into baking, if you like things simple, then what I'm about to tell you is probably not an option. But if you do enjoy baking and you enjoy things like baker's percentages in recipes, then I encourage you to get out onto Instagram and look up Keto Luna. It's keto, period, Luna. She is a master at baking. You're going to look at some of these pictures and swear that can't be keto bread. She creates a custom keto flour mix, and it's some work. She goes to a lot of work to make some of these recipes. Probably more work than most people want to go through, but certainly if you enjoy baking and you're willing to put in some time, I encourage you to check out her Instagram channel. Once again, that's keto, period, Luna. I'll link to it down in the description below, just make it easy on you. And I plan on playing around with some of her recipes to see if I can replicate what she did. I don't know that I'll necessarily make a video out of it because it strikes me looking at some of these recipes that it's probably more work than a lot of my viewers would be interested in going through in order to make a batch of buns. But that is the hot dog bun update. And now we'll take a brief little ad break. A topic that I've been bringing up an awful lot lately in podcasts has to do with YouTube's rather strange behavior of late. So things like unsubscribing viewers. I've had viewers tell me that they knew they were subscribed to me and they hadn't seen any notifications from me in a long time, and then they looked and saw that somehow they had been unsubscribed from me. I've had viewers tell me that they leave comments that disappear. I've had viewers tell me that they click the like button and it won't let them click it. I've had viewers tell me that they have notifications turned on, yet they get no notifications for my channel. Well, now we have something else to add to the list. I use a plugin in Google Chrome called TubeBuddy. Lots of content creators will use this. It allows you to look at certain analytics. It helps you create thumbnails. But most importantly for me, it had, and you notice I used the past tense there, it had a great comment management feature. I could go into my comments and do a filter. So the comment section in the YouTube Studio for creators, it gives you every comment from every video just in time order. So I don't need to go into specific videos to look for comments. They're all amalgamated, I hope that's the right word, into this comment section. Then using TubeBuddy's filters, I can filter on certain things like Have I given it a response? Have I given it a heart or a like? Does it contain a question? Does it contain a URL? Does it contain a reply which needs follow-up? And that last one is the one that I find I use the most frequently. So if someone leaves a comment and then I reply to them and then they reply to me, that would be a reply that could require a follow-up. And it allows me to continue a sort of conversation with people if a particular comment warrants it. Well, now that functionality does not work. In fact, none of the filters work for TubeBuddy anymore. And I opened a ticket with them and they started investigating, and they got back to me after a few days and told me that YouTube has made such significant changes to how it handles comments that now that functionality in TubeBuddy just doesn't work anymore, and they've removed it. So there's absolutely no doubt that YouTube is playing around with something as it relates to comments. And I don't know what their end game is. I don't know what their goal is, if it's to get rid of copyright material or make it a safe space or what. But in terms of safe space, for example, I have not in over a month had a comment fall into the held for review bucket that usually I would get 2 or 3 a day, whether that was spam or porn or just, especially nasty language or something like that. Haven't seen any of that in over a month. And I guess, I should be happy about that, but it also makes me a little bit uncomfortable, maybe more than a little bit, because YouTube is managing the comments on my channel without my input. There's something going on behind the scenes, and I hope at some point I find out what it is or that we get it straightened out. For the final topic of this podcast, we're back to 24 and 21 because we're entering a new month here, the month of June. For those of you who aren't familiar with 24 and 21, if you haven't been watching the podcast this year, the notion behind it is rather than take one big New Year's resolution that most of us, at least me, wind up failing on, instead we would take each month and try and find one positive thing that we can add, habit, whatever, and one negative thing that we can remove, whether that's a bad habit or something that's wasteful, wastes our time, our energy, our emotion, that's just doesn't add value to our lives and may even be sort of a drag on our lives. So for starters, I'm going to recap May. And for me, the positive thing that I was trying to add, notice the word trying, I was trying to add the same thing that I did in April, which was a greater adherence to the Wim Hof method, in particular, the breathing exercises. And I found I don't really enjoy doing them. I enjoy meditating. I enjoy that immensely. I have no difficulty setting aside 10 minutes a day to meditate, but to set aside 10 minutes a day to go through this breathing exercise, I didn't find it to be fun, and I don't know that I experienced any benefit from it. So I don't know that I'm going to continue even trying on that. I guess what I would ask is if there are those of you out there who have really stuck with the Wim Hof method, in particular the breathing, please let me know down in the comments below what the results were, how it changed your life, and how you decided that it was worth your time. Now, I still do the cold shower thing in the Wim Hof method, and probably at some point this month I may do the full-out ice bath just to see how that works out. But I've grown to really, truly enjoy cold showers. So much so that when I was getting my garden put together and I was just filthy, just dirty and messy, and I thought, oh, a nice hot shower would be great, I set the temp to cool, thinking, all right, that should be fine. And I got in even cool water after about 30 seconds felt way too warm to me. So I dialed it back down to cold, got myself borderline shivering, and I love it. It sounds crazy, but I've really grown to love it. The bad habit for May that I worked to improve upon was my obsession with reading YouTube comments on my phone and responding to them. Just because I felt it was taking me out of the moment, whatever I should have been doing, spending time with my family, I wasn't focused enough on because I was addicted to comments. So my new strategy would be to only reply to comments from my PC, not from my phone. So I would have to go down into the man cave, down into my office, and it was an extra step, and it was just enough of an inconvenience that I started doing it less. And now with the fact that comments have changed somehow on YouTube and that TubeBuddy isn't an effective tool for me anymore for comment management, it makes it a little bit easier for me to be not so obsessive about comments. For June, for my positives, it is finally getting to the point that it's warm enough that I would get up early in the morning and go out for some sprints and a nice long walk. So if you're wondering why I care about outdoor temperatures when I'm willing to take a cold shower, it's basically I'm sort of a fair weather exercise person. But now that it's getting warmer, I'm going to be out there at least 5 days a week, getting in some steps, listening to some audiobooks, getting a little vitamin D from the sun. That's going to be my positive. The negative that I'm going to dial back on is drinking wine. I found that over the course of 2020 and the dumpster fire that whole year was, that my wine consumption started going up. It went from being something I would have with dinner to something I would have maybe as I'm making dinner and something I'd have after dinner. And because I stick with dry reds and dry whites, it has never knocked me out of ketosis, but they are empty calories. And I think eliminating those, keeping myself to just splitting a bottle of wine with dinner with my wife from time to time, rather than making it a daily deal, plus the walking, maybe I can reverse the quarantine 15 that I put on over the course of the last year. That's my hope. We'll know at the end of June. So now it's your turn. How did May go for you? Were you successful with your positives and your negatives? And what are your plans for June? Let me know down in the comments below. Now, there wasn't an intentional Easter egg in the last two podcasts that I did. Those were the ones with Black Tie Kitchen and Dennis. But just to give you an idea of how much alike we are, we both had Grogu, aka Baby Yoda from The Mandalorian, in the background in both of our videos. That was not planned. That just happened. And based on the feedback from those couple of podcasts, Dennis and I will absolutely continue to collaborate together. In terms of podcasts, we're thinking maybe one a month might be the right sort of cadence. And definitely we're going to be working on some recipes together and maybe doing some video collaboration. But that is it for this podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching or listening.